The moon howled in pain the moment he said the words. Moonridge had never heard such silence before. A court that once roared with pride now held its breath as destiny was torn apart in front of hundreds of watching wolves. Alpha King Darius stood at the center of the marble circle, crowned by firelight and power, his presence alone enough to bend the will of the strongest warriors. And yet, in that sacred space where bonds were meant to be sealed, he ended one instead. Leora stood several steps behind him, barely visible among nobles wrapped in silk and fur. She was the Omega who did not belong to palaces, whose hands had once been stained with blood and forest soil when she dragged the wounded Alpha out of a hunter's trap years before. That single act had bound their souls long before ceremony ever could. But Moonridge no longer remembered forests. It remembered only strength, lineage, and crowns. As the rejection echoed through the hall, something ancient recoiled in the stone itself. Elders exchanged looks of approval. Whispers rolled through the crowd like wildfire. Relief replaced unease. The pack convinced itself that a fragile Omega had no place beside a king, and that fate had finally been corrected. No one noticed when Leora turned away. She did not cry. She did not scream. She walked slowly at first, then faster, slipping through corridors she once cleaned as a servant before destiny ever brushed her skin. By the time the great doors slammed behind her, Moonridge had already erased her from memory. The night swallowed her whole. Rain crashed through the forest canopy, soaking her cloak, weighing her steps until her legs trembled. Yet something inside her kept her moving, a whisper beneath her ribs, a strange warmth blooming where only emptiness had lived. Her wolf stirred uneasily, restless, protective in a way it had never been before. Leora crossed beyond the pack borders without realizing it. The wards shimmered once, then parted, as though recognizing her right to pass. Behind her, Moonridge glittered like a distant lie, its towers untouched by the storm it had unleashed. The forest was not cruel. It wrapped her in shadow and wet earth, guiding her toward an ancient river that had witnessed kings rise and fall long before Moonridge ever claimed dominion. There, her strength finally gave way. She sank to her knees beside the churning water, breath shaking, heart breaking in slow, silent pieces. It was there she felt it. Not fear, not sorrow. Life. A pulse not her own, fragile yet fiercely present, fluttered beneath her heart. Her wolf went still, then surged forward in awe, recognizing something sacred that words could never hold. Whatever she had lost in that court, something far greater had just been found. Leora pressed trembling hands to her stomach as understanding crashed over her like thunder. The bond that had been severed was not empty. It had already shaped a future beyond rejection, beyond shame, beyond any crown that could be worn. Behind her, Moonridge feasted and celebrated, blind to the fracture spreading through the very soul of the land. The rejection had not freed them. It had wounded the world. Clouds tore across the sky, revealing the moon in its full silver blaze. For a breathless moment, its light caught the river, the forest, and the lone Omega kneeling at destiny's edge. The moon did not glow gently. It burned, sharp and furious, as though marking the moment for all realms to remember. Leora collapsed forward, forehead touching the damp ground. She did not speak aloud, yet the vow rose from her heart with more power than any oath ever sworn in Moonridge's halls. She would protect what grew within her. She would raise her child beyond cruelty, beyond pride, beyond the reach of a king who did not know what he had destroyed. Far away in the marble halls now echoing with laughter and false relief, Alpha King Darius felt a sudden ache rip through his chest. He did not know why the air seemed thinner, why the firelight no longer warmed his skin. He dismissed it as exhaustion, as the weight of leadership settling deeper into his bones. But the moon knew. The river knew, and in the storm-soaked forest, an Omega cradled the future of an entire realm, while silver light carved destiny into the night. Silver light still burned across the river when the storm finally broke. Dawn found Leora where the forest had left her, cradled by mist and soaked earth, the ache in her body no longer distant but commanding. The vow she had made in the dark had taken root. There was no Moonridge here, no council, no crown. Only a broken Omega, a rising sun, and a life that refused to wait. By the time the light spilled fully through the trees, she was no longer alone. A rogue healer, drawn by instinct rather than loyalty to any pack, found her before the pain consumed her. This woman had long abandoned courts and politics, serving only the wild laws written into the bones of the world. In a shelter of woven branches, far beyond any patrol route, destiny unfolded in silence. When the child was finally born, the forest itself seemed to pause. The healer had delivered hundreds of pups in her wandering years, yet nothing had prepared her for what she saw. Etched faintly into the infant's chest was a silver mark, luminous even in the soft morning light, pulsing like a second heartbeat. It was no ordinary birthmark. It was a royal sigil older than Moonridge, a sign that appeared only in forgotten songs and forbidden histories. Leora felt its power before she ever saw it. Her wolf folded inward in reverence, recognizing a truth that shattered every doubt that had followed her from the court. The rejection had not ended her bond. It had only hidden it. They did not return to Moonridge. They did not leave tracks for hunters or alphas to follow. The rogue healer guided Leora deeper into the borderlands, to a valley where the land bent away from old pack maps. It was there that Elian was raised beneath open skies, his cradle carved from roots and moss, his lullabies carried on wind and river. Years passed in the blink of a turning season. Where the child crawled, grass thickened. Where he laughed, birds gathered. The forest did not merely shelter him, it reshaped itself around his presence. Rivers once clogged with ash ran clear. Wilted trees stretched skyward again, their leaves unfurling as though answering a forgotten call. Leora watched in wonder and quiet fear, knowing her son was more than miracle. He was a living answer to a question Moonridge had not yet realized it was asking. Far away the kingdom withered. The once lush farmlands around Moonridge cracked beneath relentless heat. Wells dried, herds thinned. The pack's borders shrank as hunger crept closer to the palace walls. Alpha King Darius threw his strength into rulership, commanding hunts, ordering new rituals, tightening control wherever weakness appeared. Yet no matter how fiercely he ruled, something vital was absent, and the land reflected the void. At night when the court slept, Darius felt it most. A hollow pull beneath his ribs, a sense of being unfinished. He stood beneath balconies of stone and gold, staring at a moon that no longer answered him, unaware that the silver light he sought was not above him, but alive in a child he had never met. The elders could deny the signs no longer. The rivers were dying. The forests were retreating. Even the wolves born in Moonridge carried less fire in their blood. The ancient tablets were brought out of sealed chambers, their runes glowing faintly as if waking from a long slumber. And so, as Elian chased fireflies through a thriving valley he would one day command without knowing why, Moonridge gathered its most powerful seers, calling for an emergency prophecy ritual that would change the course of every life bound to the Alpha Throne. The emergency prophecy ritual did not begin with fire or thunder, but with dread. Moonridge sealed its gates as the ancient chamber beneath the palace opened for the first time in generations. The seers entered the circle carrying relics older than any living wolf, their steps heavy with the knowledge that what they were about to uncover could not be unlearned. Outside the chamber, the kingdom waited, breath held, desperate for a miracle. Within the ritual space, power gathered slowly, like a storm forming beneath still skies. The runes carved into the floor flickered from ash gray to a soft, alarming silver. The land itself seemed to lean closer, listening. What the seers saw shattered every convenient belief Moonridge had clung to. The sickness was not punishment from rival packs. The drought was not a natural cycle. The realm was dying because it had severed its own lifeline. The Alpha line had been broken not by war, but by rejection, and the heir who could restore the balance had vanished beyond the reach of the throne. When the chamber doors opened again, the seers did not carry hope in their eyes. They carried inevitability. The truth spread like wildfire through the court. The Alpha's true blood heir lived, hidden somewhere beyond the kingdom, and no ritual, no sacrifice, no political alliance could substitute for that missing life. The restoration of Moonridge was not a matter of strength. It was a matter of blood. Darius did not rage. He did not deny. He turned his fury into action, ordering every noble lineage to be tested, every child of influence summoned, every ancient family forced to prove their claim. Houses that had ruled for centuries were stripped of pride in a single afternoon. He dismantled traditions, ignored alliances, and humiliated lords whose names had once been untouchable. Yet each test ended the same way. No silver mark, no resonance with the land, no heir. The more he searched, the more the hollow ache inside him deepened, until even his victories felt empty. The Alpha, who had bent an entire realm to his will, could not command the one thing he now needed. That night, Moonridge slept uneasily beneath a cloudless sky. The palace was quiet, its corridors echoing with absence. Darius stood alone above the kingdom, the wind tugging at his cloak as though trying to lead him somewhere he had long refused to go. Then he felt it. Not a voice, not a memory, a pull. His wolf stirred, alert in a way it had not been since the night of the rejection. The air shifted, carrying a scent that did not belong to Moonridge, something green and alive and unbearably familiar. The sensation did not come from the forests within the kingdom's borders. It came from beyond the wards, beyond the maps, from the forbidden borderlands where exiles and forgotten lives were said to vanish. For the first time in years, Darius did not think of duty or legacy or crown. He thought of loss. Before dawn could claim the sky, the Alpha King of Moonridge abandoned the safety of his palace, following an invisible thread that drew him away from the realm he ruled and toward a future he did not yet understand, leaving behind a kingdom that was beginning to realize its greatest mistake. The borderlands did not welcome intruders, yet they parted for him as though remembering something long forgotten. Darius traveled through broken territories where even weeds had surrendered to dust, following a pull that grew stronger with every mile. The deeper he went, the stranger the land became, until decay gave way to quiet renewal. The air thickened with moisture. The scent of growth replaced ash. And then the wasteland ended. Before him lay a valley untouched by the drought that was strangling Moonridge. Terraces of grain swayed in golden waves. Wildflowers painted the hillsides in reckless color. Streams braided the land like silver veins, their waters clear and unburdened by rot. This was not survival. This was abundance in defiance of a dying world. Hidden by the tree line, Darius watched the impossible. At the center of the valley, a child ran through fields that should not exist. Each footfall pressed life into the soil. With every burst of laughter, the earth seemed to respond, grass surging upward as though summoned by joy alone. The boy's hair caught the sunlight like flame, and the air around him shimmered with a power Darius had felt only once before in his life. His wolf surged forward in recognition. This was no wild talent. This was blood answering blood, legacy waking from a silence imposed by pride. The pull that had drawn him from the palace now roared through every part of him, undeniable and overwhelming. Memory struck him without mercy, a forest soaked in rain, an omega with dirt beneath her nails and defiance in her eyes. The woman who had saved his life when his guards had already mourned him. The woman he had cast aside beneath a glittering ceiling of stone. The name formed in his thoughts like a wound reopening. From the shadows at the edge of the field, Lyra emerged. She no longer carried the fragility Moonridge had once assigned her. Her presence was calm, steady, woven into the land itself. The years had carved strength into her posture, resilience into every line of her face. She did not rush to him. She did not hesitate. She stood as a sentinel between the valley and the king who had no claim to it. The boy sensed the shift before seeing the source. His laughter faded into cautious stillness, his small body instinctively edging closer to the woman who had become his entire world. The living valley seemed to inhale with them, as though the land itself was holding its breath. Darius felt the full weight of the moment then. This was not discovery. This was reckoning. The thriving valley, the child whose presence healed the earth, the Omega who had vanished into exile carrying more than heartbreak. It all converged into a truth so vast it threatened to tear him apart. The heir Moonridge sought was not hidden in noble halls or ancient bloodlines. He was standing barefoot in a field that should have been dead. Lyra's gaze met Darius's without fear, without softness, stripped of every illusion he had once wrapped around her existence. There was no room for crowns here, no space for authority born of rejection. Only history, consequence, and the living proof of what his pride had cost. The land did not welcome him. The valley remained bright, yet something in its song dimmed as his presence pressed closer, as though it recognized not a king, but a fracture that had not yet healed. Darius felt the weight of every step he took into that living field, each movement an intrusion upon a sanctuary built from survival and silence. The power that once radiated effortlessly from him now met resistance, not from warriors or magic wards, but from the simple instinct of a child who had never known him. Elion's laughter did not return. The boy sensed the tension as keenly as any seasoned wolf, retreating behind the steady form that had protected him since birth. The earth beneath his bare feet lost a fraction of its vibrance, as if mirroring his unease. In that subtle change, Darius understood what authority could never teach him. This child did not respond to crowns. Leora did not grant him the dignity of explanation. She did not unravel years of suffering for his understanding. The truth did not come as accusation or plea, but as absence. Her silence spoke of a life forged without Moonridge, of a son raised beyond the reach of pack politics and royal entitlement. The valley itself testified to her resolve, every green blade a declaration that her child belonged not to courts, but to freedom. Something ancient buckled inside the Alpha King then. The instinct to command, to stand above all others, fell away without ceremony. His knees met the earth not in strategy, but in surrender to a moment he could not control. The soil that had flourished beneath Elion's steps did not answer his touch. It remained firm, unyielding, indifferent to the title he carried across broken lands. Leora did not turn back. She guided her son toward a modest dwelling carved into the hillside, a home grown rather than built, its walls threaded with vines and living roots. Elion glanced over his shoulder once, curiosity and confusion warring behind bright eyes before disappearing into the safety of a world that did not include a king. As mother and child crossed the threshold, the valley exhaled. Light faded subtly from the fields. Flowers folded inward. The hum that had filled the air softened into something mournful, as though the land itself felt the absence of the one who gave it breath. Darius remained where he had knelt, stripped of command, stripped of certainty, staring at a valley that no longer sang for him. For the first time since the night he had shattered fate beneath Moonridge's ceiling, he understood the true cost of rejection. He had not lost a mate. He had lost a world. The words echoed through Darius's mind as the valley settled into an uneasy quiet, the living land slowly withdrawing from him. He remained there longer than pride would have allowed in the past, long enough for shadows to stretch across the fields that, moments earlier, had pulsed with Elion's light. It was Leora who returned first. She did not approach with fury blazing in her eyes. What she carried was heavier than rage. Memory. The years between rejection and survival unfolded through her presence alone. In the lines of her face lived nights spent hiding from patrols that hunted exiles. In the steadiness of her posture lay the story of a woman who had given birth without walls, who had learned the language of rivers when medicine was forbidden to her, who had taught her child the sound of birds before he ever learned the word pack. Moonridge had erased her, but she had not disappeared. She had become. Darius felt the truth before any explanation could reach him. While the court had celebrated her fall, she had been building a sanctuary from nothing, teaching her son not the laws of kings, but the rhythms of the world that had refused to abandon her. It was then that the fracture widened. Elion had lingered near the dwelling, curiosity drawing him closer to the conversation he was not meant to witness. The strange tension that had followed Darius into the valley had not faded for him. It had only sharpened, pressing questions into a young heart unprepared for answers. And so he heard it, not as accusation or revelation, but as a word heavy with meaning he did not yet understand. Father. The sound did not fit the life he knew. It did not belong to the quiet mornings with his mother or the evenings when the land itself seemed to listen to his thoughts. It pointed to a world beyond the valley, to a stranger who wore grief like armor and carried storms in his wake. Confusion overtook wonder. Hurt eclipsed trust. Elion turned from the dwelling before anyone could stop him, his small form cutting through the fields that had always risen to meet his steps. This time, the earth hesitated. Flowers bent beneath him instead of blooming. The sky dimmed as though the sun itself recoiled from the boy's distress. The valley shuddered. Winds that had once carried laughter now gathered in restless spirals. Clouds rolled over the peaks without warning, bruising the heavens into shades of iron and ash. The child ran faster, fear driving him deeper into the forest, away from truths too large for a heart still learning how to hope. Behind him the storm was born. Rain lashed the hillsides, not in gentle blessing, but in wild release, the land echoing the turmoil of the one who shaped it. Trees bowed, rivers swelled. The sanctuary Leora had carved from exile began to unravel beneath a power that had never known betrayal before. And then Elion vanished into the darkening woods, swallowed by shadows that closed behind him like a wound, leaving the valley trembling beneath a sky that no longer remembered peace. The tempest did not remain confined to the borderlands. It rolled outward like a living force, devouring hills, ripping through forests that had stood for centuries. Rivers burst their banks, carrying mud and broken branches toward the outer reaches of Moonridge. The kingdom that had rejected its future now stood directly in the path of its reckoning. Darius felt it in his bones before he saw it in the sky. The storm was not rage alone. It was grief made visible, heartbreak given thunder. Every flash of lightning was a cry he had ignored for years. He ran into the forest without hesitation, not as a king, but as a father chasing the fragile heartbeat of a life he had nearly destroyed. Behind him came Leora, her strength no longer measured in endurance, but in love fierce enough to challenge fate itself. The woods closed around them, branches snapping beneath the wind's fury, the ground trembling as though the land feared what would happen if the child was not found. They followed the pull of the storm, deeper into the wild, where Elion's power twisted the forest into a maze of fallen trees and blinding rain. The boy's fear carved chaos into the world, every step of his flight echoing the hurt that had never been meant for him to carry. When Darius finally saw his son again, it was not in a clearing of peace, but in the heart of devastation, where the forest bowed beneath a sky split open by lightning. Elion stood alone, small against the violence he had unleashed, his shoulders shaking with emotions too heavy for any child. This time Darius did not move with authority. He fell. The earth met his knees as it had before, but now there was no crown in his thoughts, no pack watching, no pride left to defend. Only a broken alpha facing the living consequence of his greatest mistake. His wolf bowed with him, stripped of command, offering nothing but remorse. The storm faltered. Elion felt the shift before he understood it. The wind slowed, rain thinning into scattered drops as the valley held its breath once more. Drawn by something deeper than fear, he stepped closer, his power no longer lashing outward, but folding inward, uncertain, searching. When his small hand finally reached the man kneeling before him, the world answered. Silver light ignited beneath his skin, the hidden mark blazing through storm and shadow, radiant as the moon itself. The forest stilled, rivers calmed, the sky softened, clouds unraveling as if the heavens themselves had been waiting for this single moment of connection. In that quiet, destiny was no longer prophecy. It was alive. Moonridge would not be saved by armies or rituals. It would be healed by the bond that had survived rejection, exile, and silence. A bond claimed not by command, but by surrender. The heir had been found. If this story moved you, don't let it end here. Follow, like, and share to continue the journey of the Omega, who walked away, the king who knelt too late, and the child whose heart now holds the fate of a kingdom.